A guard entered the prison shoe workshop, where Jimmy Valentine was busy stitching shoes. He asked Jimmy to follow him to the warden's office. There the warden handed Jimmy a pardon, signed by the governor, earlier that day. Jimmy accepted it, without much reaction. He had already served about 10 months in prison, as part of a 4-year sentence, but he had expected that he would stay there for a maximum of 3 months. For someone like Jimmy, who had powerful friends outside, prison never felt like a long-term stay. "Valentine," the warden said, "you'll be free tomorrow. Try to live honestly. You're not a bad man. Stop breaking into safes and change your ways." "Me?" Jimmy said, pretending to be shocked. "I've never cracked a safe in my life." The warden laughed. "Of course not. Let's see how you ended up here for that Springfield job. Was it because you refused to give an alibi for someone rich and important? Or was it a mistake by the jury? It's always something like that with guys like you." "Me?" Jimmy said again, keeping a straight face. "Warden, I don't know what you are saying. I've never even been to Springfield." The warden sighed. "Take him back, Cronin," he said to the guard. "Give him his clothes. Let him out at 7 in the morning." The next morning, at 7:15, Jimmy stood outside the warden's office. He wore the loose prison clothes and stiff shoes given to released prisoners. The clerk handed him a train ticket and $5, the amount the law said was enough for prisoners to start fresh. The warden gave him a cigar and shook his hand. In the prison records, it was written, "Valentine, 9762. Pardoned by governor." Jimmy then stepped out into the bright sunlight, a free man. He ignored the singing birds, the swaying trees, and the scent of flowers. Instead, he walked straight to a restaurant. There, he enjoyed his first meal as a free man, a broiled chicken, a bottle of white wine, and a better cigar than the one from the warden. After eating, he walked to the train station and dropped a quarter, means money into a blind man's hat at the station. Then he boarded the train. 3 hours later, he arrived in a small town near the state border. He headed straight to Mike Dolan's cafe, where Mike was working alone behind the counter. "Sorry, we couldn't get it done sooner, Jimmy, my boy," Mike said. "We had to pull some strings to get your pardon. But that protest from Springfield nearly ruined everything. The victims or the authorities there made a big fuss about you getting out. The governor almost backed out because of it, but we managed to settle things. Anyway, it's done now. How are you feeling?" "I'm fine," Jimmy said. "Do I have my key?" Mike gave him the key. He took his key, went upstairs, and unlocked the door to a back room. Everything was just as he had left it. On the floor, he noticed a small collar button. It had belonged to Ben Price, the famous detective who had arrested him. Jimmy pulled out the folding bed, moved a wall panel aside, and took out a dusty suitcase. He opened it carefully and smiled when he saw his special set of burglary tools. The set was complete, made of the finest steel, with the latest tools for opening safes, drills, punches, clamps, and more. Some of the tools were even Jimmy's own inventions. He had paid over $900 for them, ordering them from a workshop that made tools for professionals like him. After about 30 minutes, Jimmy went downstairs. He walked through the cafe and out onto the street, dressed in stylish, well-fitting clothes. His suitcase was now clean and polished. "Got any work for me?" Mike asked with a grin. "Me?" Jimmy said, acting confused. "I don't understand." "I'm a representative of the New York Amalgamated Short Snap Biscuit Cracker and Frazzled Wheat Company." Mike laughed so hard that Jimmy had to take a sip of his fizzy milk to keep a straight face. He never touched alcohol. A week after Jimmy Valentine's release, a skilled safe burglary happened in Richmond, Indiana. No clues were left behind, and about $800 was stolen. 2 weeks later, a high-security safe in Logansport was opened easily, and $1,500 was taken. The silver and securities were untouched. This made the authorities take notice. Soon after, an old-fashioned bank safe in Jefferson City was cracked open, and $5,000 in cash was stolen. The burglaries were now serious enough to catch the attention of Ben Price, the detective who had arrested Jimmy before. After examining the crime scenes, Ben Price said, "That's Jimmy Valentine's work. Look at the combination knob, it came off like pulling a radish from wet soil. Only Jimmy's special clamps can do that. And see how neatly those tumblers were punched. Jimmy only needs one hole. I guess I'm after Valentine again. This time, there won't be any early release." Ben Price knew Jimmy's ways: quick escapes, no partners, and a love for good company. Jimmy was known for avoiding punishment, but now, with Ben Price on his trail, bank owners felt safer. One afternoon, Jimmy Valentine arrived in Elmore, Arkansas, carrying his suitcase. It was a small town, about 5 miles from the railroad. He walked down the wooden sidewalk toward the hotel, looking like a young man fresh out of college. As he reached the corner, a young woman crossed the street and entered a building marked the Elmore Bank. Jimmy looked into her eyes and in that moment forgot everything about his past. She lowered her eyes slightly and blushed. Young men like Jimmy were rare in Elmore. Jimmy grabbed a boy sitting on the bank steps and started asking him about the town, giving him dimes as he went. A little later, the young woman walked out of the bank and left, unaware of Jimmy's presence. "Isn't that girl Polly Simpson?" Jimmy asked casually. "No, that's Annabelle Adams," the boy said. "Her dad owns the bank." "What are you doing in Elmore? Is that a gold watch chain?" "I'm thinking of getting a bulldog." "Got any more dimes?" Jimmy went to the Planters Hotel and checked in under the name Ralph D. Spencer. Leaning on the desk, he told the hotel clerk that he had come to Elmore to look for business opportunities. He asked about the shoe business in town. Was there a need for a shoe store? The clerk, impressed by Jimmy's appearance, gave him useful information. There was no shoe store in Elmore, only general stores sold shoes, so there was room for a dedicated shop. Business in town was going well, and the people were friendly. He hoped Mr. Spencer would stay. Jimmy decided to remain in Elmore for a few days to learn more about the town. When the clerk offered to have a bellboy carry his suitcase, Jimmy refused. It was too heavy to let someone else handle. Ralph Spencer, Jimmy's new identity, settled in Elmore and quickly became successful. He opened a shoe store and gained many loyal customers. Socially, he thrived as well, making friends and earning respect. But most importantly, he fell deeply in love with Annabelle Adams. As time passed, his feelings for her grew stronger. A year later, Mr. Ralph Spencer's situation was as follows. He had earned the respect of the community, his shoe store was thriving, and he and Annabelle were engaged, planning to marry in 2 weeks. Annabelle's father, Mr. Adams, the steady, reliable country banker, approved of Spencer. Annabelle was proud of him, and her affection for him was almost equal to her pride. He was so close to her family that he already felt like a member. One day, Jimmy sat in his room and wrote a letter to an old friend in St. Louis, sending it to a safe address. Dear old friend, I need you to meet me at Sullivan's Place in Little Rock next Wednesday at 9 p.m. I have a few things I need you to handle. Also, I want to give you my tool set as a gift. It's worth more than $1,000, and I know you'll appreciate it. Billy, I've left my old life behind, it's been a year now. I own a shoe store, I make an honest living. And in 2 weeks, I'm marrying the most beautiful girl. This is the best way to live, the honest way. I wouldn't steal a single dollar now, no matter what. After I'm married, I plan to sell my business and move out west where I won't have to worry about my past. Billy, she's an angel. She believes in me, and I wouldn't do anything wrong, ever again. Be sure to be at Sully's, I need to see you. I'll bring the tools with me. Your old friend, Jimmy. The Monday night after Jimmy wrote this letter, a detective named Ben Price arrived quietly in Elmore. He spent the next day walking around town, gathering information about Jimmy. From a drugstore across the street, he carefully watched Ralph D. Spencer. So, you're planning to marry the banker's daughter, hey, Jimmy? Ben thought to himself. We'll see about that. The next morning, Jimmy had breakfast at the Adams house. He planned to go to Little Rock that day to buy a wedding suit and a gift for Annabelle. He hadn't left Elmore in over a year and felt it was a safe place for him. After breakfast, Jimmy, Annabelle, her father, her married sister, and her sister's 2 young daughters went downtown. They passed by Jimmy's hotel, where he ran up to grab his suitcase, then they continued to the bank. Jimmy's horse and buggy were waiting outside, ready to take him to the train station. Inside the bank, everyone greeted Jimmy warmly. He set his suitcase down, and Annabelle playfully picked it up. Wouldn't I make a great traveling salesman, she joked. Wow, Ralph, this suitcase is heavy. Feels like it's full of gold bricks. Just a bunch of shoehorns, Jimmy said with a smile. I thought I'd bring them back myself to save on shipping. Mr. Adams proudly showed off the bank's new safe. It had 3 thick steel bolts and a special time lock. As he explained how it worked, his 2 little granddaughters, May and Agatha, watched closely, fascinated by the shiny metal and knobs. Just then, Ben Price entered the bank quietly and leaned against the railing and kept watching Jimmy. Suddenly, there was a loud scream. Without anyone noticing, May had locked Agatha inside the vault while playing. She had turned the handle and spun the combination dial, just like she had seen her grandfather do. The old banker rushed forward and tried to open the door. It wouldn't move. "The door won't open," he gasped. "The lock isn't set, and the time lock isn't correct." Agatha's mother screamed in panic. "What should we do now?" "Quiet," said Mr. Adams, raising his hand. "Everyone, calm down for a moment." "Agatha," he shouted, as loud as he could. The room fell silent, and they could barely hear Agatha's frightened screams from inside the vault. "There's no one nearby who can open this door," Mr. Adams said, his voice trembling. "Oh no. Spencer, what should we do?" "That child, she can't stay in there much longer. She'll run out of air, and she's so scared, she might faint." Agatha's mother, in a panic, started pounding on the vault door and calling her daughter. Someone suggested using dynamite to break the safe, but it's not safe to do that. Annabelle looked at Jimmy, her eyes full of worry, but still hopeful. To a woman, it often feels like anything is possible when the man she trusts is there. "Can't you do something, Ralph? Please, try," she begged. Jimmy gave her a small, sad smile. "Annabelle," he said, "may I have the rose you're wearing?" Confused, Annabelle took the flower from her dress and handed it to him. Jimmy tucked it into his vest pocket, took off his coat, and rolled up his sleeves. In that moment, Ralph Spencer disappeared, and Jimmy Valentine returned. "Everyone step back," he said firmly. He placed his suitcase on the table, opened it, and quickly laid out his tools. His hands moved with skill and confidence. He whistled softly, just like he always did when he worked. The room fell silent. Jimmy's drill bit into the steel. In only 10 minutes, breaking his own record, he threw back the bolts and opened the door. Agatha, frightened but unharmed, was pulled into her mother's arms. Jimmy calmly put his coat back on and walked toward the door. As he stepped outside, he thought he heard Annabelle call, "Ralph." But he didn't stop. At the entrance, a large man blocked his path. "Hello, Ben," Jimmy said with a smile. "I guess it's time to go." "No point in running." Ben Price looked at him for a moment. Then, he said something surprising. "I think you're mistaken, Mr. Spencer," Ben said. "I don't know who Jimmy Valentine is." Then, he turned and walked away.